Saturday during Steelers season. You know what that means. It's a Steelers Saturday sit down presented by Around the 412. Zachary Smith, Tyler Weeks of Around the 412 here. Tyler, we got the Chargers coming into town this week. We're going to talk about that. But Boston was here before we were. We are so ready, he said, right at 10 a.m. before we even popped up on the screen. We appreciate you being in here. Appreciate everybody that's in here. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you are here on YouTube, if you were just here from, well, maybe Twitch, but I highly doubt that. If you're here from my X account, be sure to go over to the YouTube, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content that we are putting out throughout the week. Tyler, just on the surface, what are your first thoughts about this matchup?
I think it is a game between two struggling offenses and some good, solid defensive play. I mean, I think the Steelers overall have played better defense than the Chargers have, but looking at the Chargers' opponents, and that kind of plays into that. They played the Panthers last week. I'm pretty sure my high school team could have beat the Panthers last week, and I don't think that that's not to slight the Chargers at all. It was still a good defensive performance from them. They played the Raiders in week 1. Raiders, not a great team, but then again, hey, the Raiders beat the Ravens in week 2, so don't want to take that away from them either. But I think it's two fairly similar teams, maybe not in the approach from the teams, but as far as just an offense that's still trying to find its identity and a defense that's been carrying the team. I think it's two fairly similar outlooks by both of those teams. On the one hand, you both have a struggling wide receiver room, not a lot of identity in there. You might have a number one wide receiver, and that's it. They've had success, actually more success than the Steelers running the football early on. J.K. Dobbins has been a tear in the first 2 weeks of the season. He's also been a tear on my fantasy team. Thank you very much. But yeah, I think it's an interesting matchup. I think it's a very similar matchup for both of them. And like I said, obviously you're going to get different sides of that coin for team to team. But I think when you look at just the structure of the team, how they've been winning football games, the teams are fairly similar.
I mean, literally identical in some respects. I think that these are two teams that want to win the same way, especially with Harbaugh coming in, and especially when we're going to talk about Justin Herbert. But if they're going to have to neutralize him as much as possible or not have him available to them, then certainly they are going to want to go through and operate through J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards in that ground game. Joe Alt has been a very impressive rookie tackle. We're going to talk about another rookie tackle here in a little bit too. But I think that they want to get things done offensively very similar. And they are, like, I think that the Chargers may be overachieving a little bit right now on the defensive side of the ball. I respect what they have as pass rushers. I don't think their secondary outside of Derwin James is very good. I mean, Asante Samuel's a decent cover corner, but he doesn't want to tackle. And outside of that, I just don't see it. I don't see it in the middle of the field either with their linebacker play. Diane Henley, as well as, actually Junior Colson's going to be out for this game, so they're not going to have him. Denzel Perryman for sure as well. I mean, they're decent players, but again, I think that they're guys that you can take advantage of, and we're going to talk about how we think the Steelers can do that here in a little bit as we dive into it. But Tyler, the big news of the last couple of days, the last 24 hours really for Steelers fans, has been Troy Fautanu suffering a knee injury, a knee setback in practice on Friday. Broderick Jones taking the majority of first-team reps at right tackle. It sounds like it's not going to be it's going to be this week for sure that Troy misses. It sounds like it's going to be even longer. Adam Schefter said that he's going to be out indefinitely. Kind of got the sense that would be the case. If you guys remember, I mean, going back to the draft, this was kind of talk around Troy as to why he fell to the Steelers at 20 was maybe some injury concerns. Now, I'm not going to lump this in with those because we don't know what type of knee issue this is. If it's like a degenerative thing, like that's what I think you could talk about at the draft time and say we're going to maybe have issues with this down the line. But if we're talking about like a sprained MCL or something like that, it's not like you can predict that to happen or forecast that to happen. So I don't necessarily want to lump this in with those concerns right now. We'll see what this ends up being, but it's certainly of concern that, you know, we got him back from this injury that he suffered in the preseason, and now here we are again with him looking like he's going to miss an extended period of time. John said Fautanu news somehow made me not more mad. Knee issues are concerning now. I definitely think there's a level of concern there, but again, I don't know that I can necessarily, at least as we sit here right now, lump the pre-draft stuff in with what he's dealt with so far. Again, when more information comes out about what exactly he's dealing with, I think then maybe it would be fair to do so. But now you're going to get Broderick Jones right back in the fold after he struggled a ton last Sunday with the one drive that he was given as part of that tackle rotation, which I think we can all agree was a poor idea from the Steelers to even begin with. Didn't think it was going to go well. Alan told me, though, I don't know how many people have talked about this, that he's ditched that brace. So now he's got some type of, like, if you remember, like the big rubber pads that Jerome Bettis used to wear on his elbows.
Yeah.
That's what he's got on his right side now. So it looks at least much more functional for him. I think that he's been trying to get rid of that brace and finding a way to not have it. So we'll see if this is a solution for that and what he looks like in doing so. But just off the bat, what are your first thoughts now, knowing for sure, at least for this upcoming game against the Chargers, that it will not be Troy Fautanu, going to be Broderick Jones right back in the fold?
Well, before I get into what it means for the Steelers and the Chargers, I just got to say I feel so bad for Troy Fautanu to start your career like this, having an injury bug into the preseason, starting the season. You get into one game and then you're immediately back out of the lineup. That's got to be tough on a player, especially a first-year rookie trying to develop in this league. I just feel for Troy on a personal level. I know that must suck for him. So just wanted to say that. As far as what it means for the Steelers, I think that it means that Joey Bosa could have a day on Sunday. I don't know that if looking back at last week, the one drive you had with Broderick in there, not a flattering drive. I think that you have a lot to be desired when it comes to Broderick so far this season. And I don't know what that means for the Steelers. Like run blocking, I think it'll still be okay. But when they get into pass protection, that's the one concern where I don't know what it's going to be like. And I think that that's why looking at the defensive line for the Chargers, they could have a good day and whenever the Steelers drop back into pass protection, especially if Broderick Jones is not recovered at all from what you would call that last week. I have no idea where that came from of him as a player. I don't think you've seen that many just mental mistakes / just bad performance overall since he's been a Steeler. You didn't see it last season quite like that. So he needs to take a step forward this week. And if the Steelers are going to win this football game, he needs to be one of the reasons why. And his play has to be so far improved from what we've seen so far because he's going against Joey Bosa, who is going to be attacking him all day. It's kind of like when TJ Watt goes against the team's right tackles and you know that they're just going to have his lunch. I think that you have to get a very good performance from him, mainly in pass protection, because we've seen it the first 2 weeks. The Steelers have kind of struggled to run the football a little bit. I don't think they've been terrible at it, but it's not quite what we've expected with Arthur Smith and his offense, what we kind of thought we'd see. And so you need to rely on that pass more. With Justin Fields back there, I think that you need to have as much time as possible for him in order to be able to make plays. But with Broderick being in there in this upcoming matchup, I don't know how much I trust him on the right side to be able to perform up to his abilities. It's good that he's ditched the brace. It's good that he's just in the pads. Yeah. That means there's a sign of improvement from an injury standpoint. But we talked about this week, if it was up to us, we wouldn't have had Broderick in there for the next while. We would have had Troy Fautanu in there, but injuries are the way they are. They can't predict them, and we're kind of seeing the Steelers forced into a situation that they probably don't want to be in. I think that's going to be interesting to see how Broderick Jones plays this week. I think he's going to be a big part of the offense's success if that does come about. But at the same time, he could be part of the offense's inefficiencies as well up on this upcoming Sunday. It's all going to be up to his play.
I think, to me, the thing that I'm looking at, they're also going to be without Michael Pruitt. And I don't think that a lot of people are necessarily thinking that that's like a huge loss, but he's played 68 snaps in the first 2 weeks. Like, he's played quite a bit, and he's a pretty good blocking tight end, probably their second best definitely their second best blocking tight end within that room. So I wonder how much, like, are we just going to see Darnell pretty much planted on that right side as an extra offensive lineman to help out Broderick with Joey Bosa, and just hope that Dan Moore is able to win that one-on-one matchup with Khalil Mack more often than not, because he's going to have a tough test on the other side too. I think the other part of this with slowing down these edge rushers, and this is kind of like a game plan thing now that I kind of want to get into and ways to attack this defense. From week 1 to week 2, we saw them get away from the quarterback run game, and I've had a lot of people throw ideas to me as to why that was the case. Didn't really need it against Denver's defense. They didn't feel like those edge rushers were somebody that could pose that type of threat. Even though, I mean, I think Jonathan Cooper's a good player. I think Nick Bonito's a good player. I know they lost Baron Brown in that game, but I think that they're good players. I don't think that they're great players, certainly not the caliber of Matthew Judon, who they saw in week 1 or now in week 3, and Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. But I think the best way to neutralize those is Justin Fields using his legs more, is getting the QB run game going again. And then an extension of the run game is the screen game. I think this could be a big Jalen Warren week. We saw his touches go from 4 in week 1 to 11 in week 2. I think that could increase again. I think this just screams Jalen Warren game to me because he does the types of things that slow down really good pass rushes. So to me, if I'm looking at this Chargers defense and ways to attack it, ways to slow down a really good pass rush, and by the way, I'm not trying to take away from those guys as players. They definitely pose a threat as pass rushers. And Joey Bosa has played pretty solid run defense this year, but that is not like they're lighter edge rushers. Like they're typically guys that you want to run the football at. So to your point about maybe the ground game being more successful this week, I think there's some credence to that because these are guys that you think that you can take advantage of on the perimeter. I mentioned Asante Samuel Jr. does not want to tackle, has no interest in doing it. Run the football at him. If our wide receivers can't block him, then we really got problems with what's going on in that room. So, yeah, I mean, those are my first thoughts in terms of attacking this defense. Do you have anything to add really with, the QB run game, Jalen Warren in the screen game? I mean, Najee in the screen game too, but I think that Jalen Warren is probably the guy you'll see in that capacity more often.
Yeah, as far as the screen game goes, nothing to really to add to it besides as soon as the Steeler fans see a screen, they're going to lose their minds, even if it's successful.
Well, they haven't been good at it yet this week. Yeah, they have. I'm sorry, this season in the first 2 games, they haven't been good at it. But I feel like
that's what I mean. Even if it's successful, the first time you see it, fans on Twitter are going to lose their minds. As far as the quarterback run, we've been pining for that. We've been wanting that, and we talked about on this week's episode that it doesn't look like they're preparing for Justin Fields as the starter, even though he is going to be their starter. It doesn't look like they're designing an offense in order to have success with Justin Fields. You're not utilizing what is probably the best part of his play, which is his legs. Like imagine Josh Allen not using his legs. Imagine Lamar Jackson not using his legs. It makes no sense to plan an offense around that type of a player and not include that. I think that that's something that the Steelers need to exploit their defense with, because especially if they can open up the pass game and make more quarterback runs based off of success in the pass game, I think that keeps the defense on their heels. It keeps them honest, and that's something that I think can open up for the Steelers. But I'm curious to see if in his 3rd consecutive start, are the Steelers actually going to implement that more? You saw it a little bit in week 1, non-existent in week 2. If Justin Fields is going to be your starter and you want to have successful offense and not what you saw last week where in the second half you only crossed the 51 time, I think you need to implement those quarterback runs more and more in your offense. I think the offense is going to have success. And for the reasons you mentioned, I think that the run game, we're finally going to see it open up, I think, in week 2 or in week 3, as opposed to what we saw in week 1 and week 2. Like I said, they weren't terrible in the first 2 weeks, but it still left a lot to be desired. There's a lot left on the bone there for what we were expecting to get out of a run game. And when I think that you implement more of Justin Fields in that, along with what Najee Harris has been doing, and you get Jalen more and more and more snaps, because he saw a significant snap jump from week 1 to week 2. I expect to see the same in week 3. I think that you're going to be able to attack the ground game more. So that's where I think the Steelers' offensive success is going to come from. And then, of course, George Pickens. I mean, George Pickens is going to be attacking Asante Samuel Jr. You saw what he did to the Broncos last week. I think you can see how easily he can take over a game just as a single wide receiver out there. Even if he's not getting the ball, even if he's not making a catch necessarily, he can take over a game, cause penalties. And I think that that's something that the Steelers needed to take advantage of on a week-to-week basis, just knowing how much of a freak athlete they have on the outside with him.
Yeah, I put out this on Twitter this past week. So on the year, George just has 8 catches for 114 yards, but he's had 128 yards and a touchdown negated by offensive penalties. His average separation score in both weeks is in top 6, and that was while seeing A.J. Terrell on 80% of his routes and Pat Surtain, the second, 71% of his routes. So, I mean, George's play has been there. They haven't necessarily been able to take advantage of it to the full extent yet. We'll see if this is a week to do so. He's going to have, like, again, I'm not trying. I like Asante Samuel as a player. Actually, I wanted the Steelers to draft him the year that he came out. But he's not as good as AJ Terrell or Pat Surtain II. So definitely the easiest matchup so far that he's had. I'm curious to see if he is going to shadow. I wouldn't think so. I think he'll exclusively play on one side, and we could see Christian Fulton maybe get some snaps against George. Like, either way, I think George is lined up definitely to have a big day. If the quarterback and the protection hold up. To that point, though, I'm curious to see how many true pass sets we even see them put into. I mean, it was like 10 in week 1, and it was probably the same amount or less in week 2. Like, Arthur's kind of protecting this offensive line, I feel like. And I don't feel like that's going to change, certainly when you find out late in the week that all of a sudden Broderick Jones is back in the starting lineup. So I think that they're still going to protect them in that way, kind of get Justin out of the pocket and on the move to get a lot of these, do a lot of bootlegs. Again, go back to the screens, get the QB run game going. I think that those are kind of the ways that they want to attack. On the flip side of this, the Steelers defense versus the Chargers offense. Justin Herbert, big conversation point this week as well. Max kind of started out by saying, do we think Justin Herbert is playing, boys? It is very hard when you hear the injury that he's dealing with to imagine him playing, because it's a high ankle sprain. We are just now getting Roman Wilson back this week from an injury that he suffered the first day in pads in training camp from a high ankle sprain. No, I'm not saying like, everybody's 1-to-1 in terms of being able to play through that, deal with that, or whatever, where it's the exact same injury. But if he does play, he ain't going to be moving. And you're talking about a wounded duck going against this Steelers front seven. I understand the Chargers offensive line pretty good, especially in the bookends, but I think that you can beat them up the middle. If Justin Herbert plays in this game, Keanu Benton is going to deliver at least one massive lick to Justin Herbert in this game that I would be very concerned about if I was Chargers fans in terms of the duration of the season, the long-term health of Justin Herbert. I know I've thrown some jokes out there on Twitter about like, oh, I'm a diehard Chargers fan. I don't want to see Justin Herbert play against this team. But legitimately, even as an unbiased football enjoyer who loves watching Justin Herbert, I would have serious concerns about him playing in this football game with what he's dealing with going against this defensive front.
Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that whenever you find out 2 days before the game that he has a high ankle sprain, that he's going to be in there. And
I mean, did you see the amount of tape? You're talking like 5 rolls.
Yeah, and if he's in there, how successful is he going to be? Justin Herbert, he's not necessarily one of those running quarterbacks, but he has always had that capability, and he needs to be able to move around the pocket. If that ankle is taped up like that, if he's not able to be on his feet, light on his feet, how successful is he going to be at quarterback? Like, is it going to be better to have him flat-footed in the pocket, just kind of like stones on his feet, as opposed to who in the world is their backup quarterback?
Easton Stick is currently listed as their backup quarterback, but they also have Taylor Heineke currently on the practice squad. And it was like 30 minutes after they put out that Justin Herbert was questionable and it came out that it's a high ankle sprain. Like 30 minutes after that, there was like this quote that came out from Harbaugh about how quickly Heineke's picking up the offense. So I was like, okay, are they putting this out there because this is saying like he would be elevated and would probably start this football game if Justin Herbert couldn't go? I think he's a better option than Easton Stick. I think he's awful. But like I think like for what the Chargers want to do on offense right now, they're rushing for nearly 200 yards a game. The caveat there is that they played one of those 2 games against the Carolina Panthers, but they've been very successful on the ground. And I think that they can find some level of success there against the Steelers defense. I certainly don't think that they're going to run for nearly 200 yards. I still think that would be their plan of attack, regardless of who's at quarterback. And if Justin Herbert is playing with a high ankle sprain, it needs to be. If Taylor Heineke plays, it's going to be. So, like, I don't know that their game plan changes all that much, regardless of who is in at quarterback. Obviously, Herbert, far more talented, but with the way that they're going to have to manage him and play the game with him at quarterback, I don't like just. Again, I know that I'm sounding just like a Steelers fan that doesn't want to see Justin Herbert in there. But like as a Chargers fan, I'd be very concerned about the duration of the season if he plays in this football game.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't make sense if he plays, because if your game plan is not going to change really whatsoever as far as how you are approaching the Steelers defense, why would you risk further injury for Justin? Why would you have a flat-footed guy out there versus someone like Taylor Heineke that is fully healthy, can move around the pocket if he
They're
needs to.
28th
Like,
in yards per game or passing yards per game, even with Justin Herbert. Like, it's not like they're having the
I
offense
was
go through
looking
him
at their
anyway.
stats. In the one game, Justin Herbert threw for 144 yards against the Raiders, and against the
Yeah.
Panthers, which you think he would have had a field day against, he only had 130 yards. It's not like they're throwing the football a ton. He's literally turned into JJ McCarthy at Michigan because Jim Harbaugh's taken over. He's not asked to do a lot of stuff. He's not being asked to make a lot of hard decisions right now. They're taking over the football game on the ground. So if that's the case, I would definitely start Taylor Heineke if I'm the Chargers. And speaking as a Chargers fan, why would I, like, if it was like this, where we have say a young Ben Roethlisberger has a high ankle sprain. Obviously, he probably would have played anyway. Doesn't even matter. But if we had a young Ben Roethlisberger and then Tommy Maddox behind him, why would we play Ben Roethlisberger with a high ankle sprain and risk furthering in the injury, especially back then when we know the Steelers are going to run the football?
It's certainly not in week 3.
It doesn't make sense to me why they would make that decision, why they'd risk it. If he's going to be back there wrapped up, how many cortisone shots are you going to have to put into that ankle for him to not even feel it anymore to bounce around on it? I've had a high ankle sprain. It sucks. So I like you said, I might be a Steelers fan just ranting that I don't want to see Justin Herbert, but I literally don't think it makes sense if you're going to get a same game plan from the Chargers offense anyway.
Yeah, Matt is in here. He said, "Hey, Zachary, how's it going, Matt? Appreciate you being in here." Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we know, again, if you look at what the Chargers have done the first 2 weeks, what Jim Harbaugh offenses have done in the past, DB was on Afternoon Drive yesterday, Derek Bell with Alan and I, and he mentioned, like, he's seen a lot of similarities with this offense going back to when Harbaugh was at Stanford and had Andrew Luck there, and the way that they would operate games. Obviously, they would take their shots here and there, which is kind of what Herbert's doing right now. But as a whole, again, they're 28th right now in passing yards per game. They're just not having the offense operate through him. They're having him kind of be like a complementary piece right now to what they're doing, which is very interesting. So I don't know. Again, we'll see if it happens. As of right now, I'm going to say that he doesn't play. That's my best guess. I think they're kind of being coy about it. But with the amount of tape that I saw in that right ankle, I just don't see it happening. She said, % chance y'all think Troy plays? 0. He's not going to play this 0%. Week for sure. If you ask me for the Indianapolis game next week, 0% chance that he's going to play in that game. I mean, if you're putting the word indefinitely on it, like I wouldn't roll out him going on IR. Maybe he replaces Dylan Cook's spot, like they swap. Dylan Cook comes off IR and he goes on IR because I think Dylan Cook is getting closer to a return. The good news for the offensive line, Isaac Seumalo is going to practice for sure next week in full capacity at some point, I believe. And being that it wasn't like a lower body injury, he was dealing with a pec thing, I think he could go against Indianapolis next week. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But the offensive line, well, they're certainly hurting at tackle right now, do have reinforcements on the way. Speaking of reinforcements on the way, kind of the last point of the game that I want to get to here, Roman Wilson set to make his NFL debut, practiced in full the last couple of days of practice this week. No injury designation. He's going to be good to go. Do you have a level of expectation for what Roman Wilson is going to be able to provide to this football team out the bat?
Well, got to be honest, the bar is pretty low for what I'm expecting out of a wide receiver. If he can come in and pass block or run block, he's already better than his peers on the team. As far as expectation goes, this is something that I think that I'm going to have an unfair expectation, or maybe not me, but like just I think fans in general will have an unfair expectation from what they want out of Roman Wilson because he is the rookie wide receiver, but also because of how bad the other wide receivers have been around the Steelers. I think that there's going to be a level of expectation there where it's kind of like a savior mentality, like you need to come in and help this offense. And I don't think that's fair to him. I don't think that he's that kind of player, at least right now. I don't think you can expect that from a rookie wide receiver. I do think that he can come in and do good things. I think that he could come in and, like I said, provide a spark in the run blocking, excuse me, the run blocking for the offense. I don't think, but as I said, the bar is pretty low for what the Steelers need from their wide receivers right now. I'm curious to see how he does like in actual pass sets. See if he takes a step from what we saw during the summer. They need him to. They need him to, because right now there's a clear cut wide receiver 1 and then a bunch of wide receiver 5s on this team. They need
Oh, wow.
least,
You've dropped them from 4s to 5s, huh?
Oh, no. Yeah. They are a bunch of wide receiver 5s. They need to meet in the middle and at least to get a wide receiver 3 out of Roman Wilson. They need to get somebody that's going to be consistent in his play. And I'm not asking for an all-pro. I'm just asking for efficient football. I'm asking for efficient blocking. I'm asking for effort. I think that you can get some good things out of Roman Wilson. I'm going to temper my expectations for him when he first comes back, but as the season progresses, I would like to see those strides made. And a lot of rookies do make those strides. I mean, look at what Joey Porter Jr. started out in the summer versus what he ended the season at last year. I think that maybe you could see a similar trajectory with Roman Wilson, maybe not as high of a ceiling as far as the type of player, but I think you could see that type of improvement throughout the season.
You mentioned that fans are probably going to have an unreasonable expectation. I am here to temper those expectations for the fans. And actually, Crow in the comments kind of did it for me before I was able to much from Roman Wilson. He's barely played, so whatever we can get from him, it's a positive, will be a plus. I fully agree. Especially, we just talked about Justin Herbert's injury, the type of injury that it was, right? High ankle sprain. That's what Roman Wilson's coming back from. To me, the biggest thing is I don't expect to see that level of explosiveness, which is kind of Roman's calling card. Like, he is a very explosive player. He's very fast. It's how he beats you. He's not the best route runner in the world, but that straight line speed, his ability to get in and out of breaks is why he succeeded in college and why people believe that he can succeed to a level in the NFL. I just don't know, coming off a high ankle sprain, how quickly that burst and that acceleration is going to return to him because of the injury that it was. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of right there. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 10 or less snaps on Sunday. Like, I think this is more about, I want him active and to get a helmet, to get his feet wet, to get acclimated to the NFL and whatever it is. But I think we could see it come in very small doses. Like, I don't know that he's going to be a guy right out of the gate that they're saying, yep, go play 50% of the offensive snaps. I have a hard time seeing that. I think he's going to be very package specific right out of the gate.
Based on what we've seen from the Steelers through 2 weeks, would you rather Roman Wilson have a greater impact in run blocking or in the pass game immediately?
I said the fact that we've gotten no receiver besides George has even like 30 yards this year on the season. So, like, the fact that they're not providing in that way, the bar has become so low for what they're doing. I just need to see them be able to elevate what this run game can be on the perimeter by being decent run blockers. So if Roman is going to be a better run blocker than Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin, I believe that he's going to be, then yeah, I think that ultimately he's going to be the second wide receiver out there. It's just, I don't know that it happens right away because of the injury that he's coming off of. Like, even if that's going to be the case and he's going to be out there for run blocking, he's still got to pose a threat as a receiver. Otherwise, you become too obvious what you're doing. I mean, for the love of God, though, Scotty Miller was the number one receiver on the field in 13 personnel at times last. So, like, I'm trying to figure out what this wide receiver deployment is right now. Van Jefferson played at 81% of the team snaps last week, with George playing like 77%. Like, I don't know what we're doing, but we'll see what Roman Wilson looks like and how much he's going to play. Faustino said, how much will the tight ends be involved in this game? So the tough part here, I mentioned Michael Pruitt, right, who's played like 68 snaps so far this year. He played over 50% in week 1, somewhere in the 40-ish range week 2. So, like, he's played quite a bit. You're not going to have him at your disposal this week. I think Rodney Williams is an NFL quality tight end, but I'm just curious to see, like, is he going to play that much? Because if not, you would think that it's going to be less, unless you're going to all of a sudden, flex out Connor Hayward in the slot and you have him run routes and operate kind of as a receiver. I don't know. So I think you'll see a lot of Pat and a lot of Darnell, but we've seen a lot of those two guys in the first 2 weeks. The question is, do we see a third tight end as much as we've seen, like in the case of Michael Pruitt? I don't know that they're going to play hot rod that much, but I do think that you're going to have to see them heavily involved, obviously, in the blocking game, because I think that you're going to have to help these tackles out with these pass rushers. But in terms of, running routes and in the receiving game, I don't expect it to be the same, if like the same or less is where I'm at. I definitely don't see it being more this week.
Yeah, as receivers, I think it's going to be at least the same, if not less, like you were just mentioning. I think what you're going to notice more is what you mentioned in the beginning of the show, talking about protecting Broderick Jones a little bit. Can we see Darnell Washington just kind of like sitting on that right side with him, help him against Joey Bosa, kind of help out the Steelers offense as a whole, creating better success on that right side? That's where I think that the main focus for the tight ends is going to be, is like watching what Darnell Washington, excuse me.
You're molding them together for one player for Sunday.
That's what I think is going to happen. I think that's where, are the Steelers going to have much involvement from the tight ends? Yes, but I think it's going to be more so in the blocking game from Darnell Washington, and that's where I think they're going to find the success. I don't think that you necessarily need to have all of that like success through the air. I think that Pat's still going to get his. I think he's still going to have a few catches for some yards, but I think that where you're going to really need
Derwin James on Sunday.
Yeah. But where I think you need to really focus is in the run blocking. I think that you need to open up the run blocking in this game.
All right, so let's get into some predictions then before we get out of here. And you guys in the comments can certainly participate in this as well. But Tyler, we're going to do this every week. I need your score prediction, and I also need one at least semi-bold prediction for something that happens in this game.
Okay. My score prediction is going to be 23-15. Don't ask me how the Chargers are getting
insane.
To 15.
Wait,
don't know?
Did you watch yesterday's afternoon drive yet?
No.
Okay. All right.
Just not. You're not gonna add anything.
You'll see when I do my score prediction. You'll see why I asked that.
Okay, 23-15. Don't ask me how the Chargers are getting to 15, but I think the Steelers are going to limit them offensively. I think that you're actually going to see
5 field goals or one of the touchdowns to go for 2 and get it.
Yeah. Not sure which one it's going to be, but it's going to happen. Maybe a safety's in there somehow. I don't know, but God, I hope not. But I after saying that, I'm like, God, I hope not. I think the Steelers are going to finally open things up on the ground a little bit. You're going to see some success running the football. I think they're going to have a multi-touchdown game for the first time this season. And so I think that 23-15, that's a solid score. I think it's going to be an offensive struggle, at least to start, because of the way that these two teams are built. It might be an offensive struggle the entire time if Justin Herbert is not playing for the Chargers. And my bold prediction for the game is that J.K. Dobbins is going to be held to under 75 yards rushing. I know that may not sound super bold to a lot of people, but through the first 2 games, he against the Raiders, he had 135 yards, and against the Panthers, he had 134 yards on the ground. I think that and then Smitty, you mentioned that in his career, he's averaging 7 yards a carry against the Steelers.
Yes.
So I think that holding him to 75 yards on the ground would be a huge success for the Steelers defense. And looking at their season stats right now, the Steelers are only giving up 76.5 yards per game on the ground through 2 games. I think that that's a good bar to hold. I think the Steelers get it done. I think they just swallow him up on the inside. I think that while he has averaged 7 yards per carry in his career against the Steelers, I don't think that he's played a Steelers defense that has been this good, especially on the inside, especially the front 2 phases when it comes to the defensive line and the linebackers. I don't think that he's faced a defense this good for the Steelers, so I think that they're going to have a lot of success against them.
Well, yeah, to that point, in the past few seasons, the run defense has been a weakness for this team, and I feel like we're at the point now where it's a strength. Cam Hayward back 100% after his injury last year, getting up there in age, but certainly still playing great football. Keanu Benton has been awesome. Mon Adams, and then how much does a healthy Larry Ogunjobi change the equation as well? So to that point, and then you obviously added Patrick Queen. Yeah, it is bold. That in itself
is bold.
That in itself is a bold prediction. The reason that I asked if you watched or listened to Afternoon Drive yet was because your score is literally off by 2 total points from me, 1 point for each team. Very odd score, but I'm saying 22-16. The Steelers win this one. My bold prediction that I gave on there was a Landon Roberts forces a fumble, but I always feel like I got to add another one on here because I don't want to just regurgitate everything from that podcast onto this show. We're going to go to the offensive side. 2 straight weeks, we're getting a Darnell Washington touchdown.
Wow. That would not be on my Steelers bingo card at this point in the season. I would say that him having 1 touchdown through week 3 would not even be on my Steelers bingo card. So the fact that he would have
prediction, like for the season, I thought like he'd catch like 12 passes in total on the season, maybe have like 3 or 4 touchdowns, which is still very possible to end up happening, by the way, at the end of the season. But yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling it this week that he's going to catch another one. And it might be his only catch of the game, by the way. I think he's going to be planted pretty much on right off those tackles' hips. But the only touchdown, Monongahela Mike says. That's very this might be the quickest game in NFL history if these two teams do what they want to do. I mean, you might see like 80 rushing attempts. So, I mean, I might be back home by 3:00. Who knows?
That's very true. Only like an hour and a half game, including halftime. I'll actually add another prediction. I think that one of the touchdowns offensively, because I think that the Steelers are going to get 2. I think one of the touchdowns is going to be a Justin Fields rushing touchdown.
Okay.
Now, whether that's a designed run or he scrambles for it, I'll leave that up to interpretation. But I think he's going to find the end zone.
Yeah. We'll see how many stoppages there are. That's also Bulls predicting that as well. Clock's going to be ticking, that's for sure. Brian Huber, last thing before we get out of here. Prediction on how many yards Jones will get in penalties. I don't like this question. I don't like to have to predict negative things. I'll say 1 false start and 1 hold. So 15 yards.
Okay. Hey, before we get out of here, what is your biggest matchup that you're going to be watching on the day? Single players, not necessarily facets of the game, like single players matchups.
I mean, I feel like it has to be the tackles versus the edge rushers. Tackles versus the edge rushers. I mean, but even on the other side, right? Like Joe Alt versus TJ Watt, Rashawn Slater.
That's what I was going to say. The one that I'm most intrigued by, because of how good Joe Alt has looked through 2 weeks, what's he going to do against TJ? That's where I'm curious to see how good this guy's going to be against one of the best in the game.
He's been fantastic. At the same time, he also switched sides and he's a rookie. Like I think TJ's going to get him at least once, but yeah, he's been awesome, especially in the run game too. Like I think that they've been able to run the ball largely because of how good those tackles are, run blocking. So all 4 of them, Dan Moore Jr. versus Khalil Mack, Broderick Jones versus Joey Bosa, TJ Watt versus Joe Alt, Alex Highsmith versus Rashawn Slater. All 4 of those matchups to me are musty matchups. Hasn't the Chargers center been struggling? Yes, that's why I mentioned Keanu Benton, Mont Adams, Larry Ogunjobi, TM Hayward. The interior of that offensive line in general, the tackles have been good, but I think that they can be had up the middle, which is the quickest way to the quarterback, which is why to me, Justin Herbert will be a sitting duck if he does go in this one. Keanu Benton could, like, the pressures have been there. He was largely the reason that dropped. I mean, I don't even know if I would consider it drop. The interception that Patrick Queen could have had against Bo Nix, where he was like able to disengage his hands and he almost intercepted it. Keanu Benton on that play, like I don't know if people noticed it that much because of like just watching Patrick Queen and stuff. The rep that he had there was disgusting. Like that chop move is so good. His club move is so good. Like, so I think that he could definitely have a big day. If you want another prediction from me, Keanu Benton has a big day. What does that entail? Maybe 3 pressures. Maybe he gets his first sack of the season. But I just think he's going to be very, I don't know if it was showing the box score, but he's going to have a very nice day.
I like that. I would say this is a bold prediction, but we should have seen it in week 1. We kind of did. It just 2 of them were called back. So Watt having 3 sacks. Yeah. I like that one. If he gets 3 sacks against Joe, I'll be very impressed. Not because I think that TJ can't do it, but like Joe is a mountain of a man, and he's been very good through 2 games.
Absolutely. All right, let us know your predictions, whether you guys are watching this back or live right now. We'll see them afterwards, but we're going to get out of here. We try to keep these things to 30 minutes. Well, we're at 38 right now. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. As of course, don't miss any of the content here, whether it's the podcast throughout the week or, of course, every Saturday, sit down right here before a Steelers game. So appreciate you guys tapping in. We'll see you guys next week. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been Steelers Saturday Sit Down. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.